Now with my image selected, I'm going to go to my tools, and I'm going to make the image 3D. Now my template has a viewport 3D in it that has one element. Let's go to my model container and find my model. Let's go over to my property inspector like I did last time, expand my material group, and let's set my material to be solid red. Let's set my back material, add a new material to it, and set the texture brush here to be solid green. So now when I take that model and transform it, you'll see that I end up with a two-sided rectangle that's red on one side, green on the other. I'm going to undo to get my rotation back where it was. And now I'm going to create two animations on my radio button for when it's selected and when it's not. The first one is going to be switch to red. And after 1 second, I want my rotation to be 360 degrees. Now I'm going to create another animation, switch to green, and this time at 1 second, I want my animation to go to 180 degrees. So it flips over. Now if you remember our discussion on handoff animations, since I didn't specify a keyframe at 0, what I'm doing is I'm telling my animation that I don't care what the rotation was at the beginning, just give it 1 second and flip to this side at that point. Now that I've got my two animations, I just need to hook them up to a property trigger to do what I want. So now I want to come out of animation mode. I need to hook up a property trigger to switch and activate the two different timelines. So let me add a new property. When the target element is checked, and the action when it activates is I want the switch to green to begin, and when it deactivates, I want the switch to red to begin. So now, as soon as my property is checked, it'll run the switch to green animation. As soon as it is no longer checked, it'll switch to red. Now let's press F5 and take a look at how this looks. I'm going to click on the rectangle, and it spins around, and when I select a different radio button that would deselect it, it switches back to the red side. Okay, this is starting to look good, but let me go ahead and apply that style to the other radio buttons so they all look the same. I'm going to scope back up to my main window, and I'm going to open the resources and find my style. Here's my 3D radio button. I'm just going to click and drag it to my radio button here and say go ahead and apply it to the template. Now with just one click and drag, I'm applying that template to each of my radio buttons. So now all three of my buttons look right. I click one of them, it turns green, and now I click a different one, it turns green, and the other one switches back to red. Alright, this is really starting to look good, but I have another problem. I don't have any text. My user is supposed to magically know that the top button refers to one value and the bottom refers to another. This doesn't work. So let's go ahead and fix that. Now let's go back into my radio button. I'm going to right click it and edit the template. And now I have my viewport 3D, but I can't add a text value into a viewport 3D. And since the viewport 3D is the only child of the template, if I try to add a content presenter, it'll wipe out the viewport 3D and throw away all the work that I've done. How do I get around this problem? Well, earlier we took multiple controls and grouped them together into a single layout panel. You can actually group a single control into a layout panel the same way. So when I right-click Viewport 3D and say Group into a Grid, for instance, now I have a grid with one child, that child being the Viewport 3D. With the grid as the activated element, let me expand my asset library, grab a content presenter, and I can double-click it and drop it down into the text. Now the content of each radio button is displayed for me, so when I go back up to my top document, I can select the radio button, and in the Properties Inspector, for the first one, set the content to soup, select the next one, and say sandwich, and select the bottom one, and say both. Now, once again, I've been able to use my content presenter to specify whatever value I wanted. In fact, if I had pictures of my soup, my sandwich, and so on, I could use my content presenter the same way to display those pictures instead of flat text. So now I can press F5, and my behavior is just what I expect.